Thank God for broadcast recordings. Right.
Yeah.
That kind of thing wouldn't happen in the studio.
No
No.
way. Yeah, it is a poor recording, but it's a good recording because, I mean, first of all, that thing, Roland goes on and on and on and on and on, and he has to keep. It comes down, it rebuilds. It's a constant build, and it comes down and it goes back up again. And the big thing is that you hear that ring in his snare drum. You know, you hear that backbeat he's got. It's so beautiful. It's so well placed, and he goes to it when he needs it, and
Right.
then he leave it, then he go back to it again. You know, but he didn't get on it and just stay on it. He dropped down and then he'd come back to it again.
Yeah.
And generally, the backbeat was generally accompanied by he was playing hi hats usually. There was one spot there where I think I heard the Chinese cymbal, but along with it. But basically, he used the hi hat along with the backbeat. And
When
you know,
when did you hear him, Mel, in person?
I heard
Did
him
you
in
hear
person for the first time was with Louis Armstrong's big band. That's the first time I ever saw him was with a big band with Louis Armstrong, and he did his routine, you know, with lighting a cigarette and without look by no hands, you know, the sticks. He was playing a solo, and he took a cigarette out of a pack out of his pocket, and got the cigarette up into his mouth, got the matches out of another pocket, lit the match without taking it out of the it was with a box of matches. I don't know how the hell he did it. One stick would go from his mouth, you know, he'd grab a stick, would go into his mouth, and while he kept playing, he never stopped playing. And that was like a routine he did, you know. And I know it was a routine because I saw a couple of shows and he did the same thing more than once. Once you see it more than once, you know it's a routine.
Yeah.
That's the first time I heard him play, and he just knocked me out. He played beautifully. The next time I heard him was in New York, also again with Louis Armstrong, but with the small group.
Mm-hmm.
And then I heard him with a Dixieland band. You know, I never heard him play with the modern groups. At the time, I never got to hear him with the modern groups, but except on record.
Right.
But I did get to hear him once. There was some little club over on the west side. It might have been on 52nd Street, but it wasn't over on in the swing
Street.
No, it wasn't in that area. And I caught him in a place. In fact, it's the same place I saw George Weddling working. I can't think of the name of the place, but it was a Dixieland joint. And he sounded great. There was no bass, just him and piano and a three-horn front line. Max Kaminsky and those guys, you know, and he just sounded fantastic. And I got to sit close and see what he was doing, you know. But there's where he played a lot of snare drum and played a fantastic Dixieland.
Could you describe what he was like physically for folks who never saw him?
Well, he was a big man. He was big. He was built like Thad Jones. If you've ever seen Thad Jones, then that's what Big Sid looked like. He was big, large shoulders, you know, and he was a huge man. But he had a light touch.
That's the amazing thing
Yeah.
to me is how much finesse. That's the word I'm
That's
looking
it.
for. How much finesse he plays with, and such big hands and everything. And I guess in contrast with Davy Tuff, who they say weighed about 100 pounds or something.
Davy was a little lightweight.
Yeah, but they both could. Yeah.
They both used whatever they needed to get what they had to get the results.
Yeah, those extended solo we're going to hear a little bit later of Big Sid's that we've heard many times, the great Steak Face solo. Again, it's fascinating because it shows he must have been doing a lot of showmanship because the audience is cracking up.
Oh, sure.
But when you listen to it from a purely musical standpoint, you're not missing anything. You know
No,
what I
no,
mean?
no.
It makes a lot of sense.
Sure.
I heard a story. I don't know whether it's apocryphal or whether it's true. It's probably true. I think it was. Who was it? I'm not sure who told the story, but he said that when Buddy Rich was with Tommy Dorsey's big band after the war, or like right after the war, 45, that Sid was on the West Coast and Tommy Dorsey's band was on the West Coast, and they used to have a lot of jam sessions, and drummers, especially being competitive, they would actually follow each other at a bunch of like after-hour jam sessions at different times. Supposedly Buddy would play all this tremendous stuff, play way over his head technically and everything. So Sid would sit down and do a little rub-a-dub to kind of drum stuff, and and Buddy used to get frustrated, and he was trying to find out why Sid was outplaying him each time, in a nice, friendly, learning, constructive way. That he was a little, it was kind of ironic to him that he could play all that technical stuff, but meanwhile Sid would, I guess, play more music.
Well, Buddy was good.
And he was very young then, too.
Buddy was young. But Buddy always had a lot of respect for for simplicity. You got to realize Buddy just had all this technique that he was born with. I mean, and it was exploited. It was used. It was pushed. He had to do it.
Sure.
And when you're driven to when you're actually the fastest drummer in the world, and you don't even know why, and people expect you to play that way, and then when you run into these guys, and then you become a musician. Finally, at a certain point in your life, you become a musician, and you hear people like Sid Catlett or Dave Tuff or drummers who are the opposite of what you are. You want to know, and you wonder, like, why? I mean, why do I love that? Why do I like what they're doing almost better than what I'm doing?
Yeah.
And then, but if you talk to them, they love what you're doing because they can't do that either. Because all of these drummers loved Buddy's drumming. I
Sure.
mean, they all admired the hell out of him because nobody could do what he did.
Yeah.
So the point is that if you do what you do great, it doesn't matter. The main thing is that you do it great.
Yeah.
If you do it great, the other great drummers will admire it, and everybody has their thing, and that's all there is to it.
We're talking with Mel Lewis, and it's 7:45. This is the History of Jazz Drums, segment number 3, and this is the Musician Show, which is the Wednesday evening version of Jazz Alternatives here on WKCR FM in New York, 89.9 on your FM dial. Lauren Schoenberg with you, and if you're enjoying this, I'd like to remind you that we'll be picking up where we leave off next Tuesday at noon to 3 next Tuesday. Well, right now we're going to switch gears and hear Big Sid Catlett on some very historic recordings. Charlie Parker and Dizzy Gillespie together with what was a working band at the Three Deuces, except for the fact that Sid Catlett, Max Roach, I believe, was out with Benny Carter's band at the time, and I think Stan Levy was in there for a moment. But when they recorded, Sid was the one that they wanted. Big Sid Catlett with Charlie Parker, Dizzy Gillespie, Al Haig, and Curly Russell. And to begin, we'll hear Salt Peanuts and Sure Enough. Again, focus on Sidney Catlett on the drums.
Salt peanuts. Salt peanuts, 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 salt peanuts.
Okay, now I'm going to tell you something. He did exactly what he had to do. He played time. He didn't play any bebop at all on that. He didn't do any Max Roach-isms, no Kenny Clark-isms, no Roy Haynes-isms,
Yeah.
none of that. But you know why? Because that wasn't his thing.
Right.
He didn't drop one off-beat bomb. Nothing was off the beat. There was a couple 1 and 4s I heard, very lightly. He played straight ahead time. His little solo was typical Sid, straight ahead, ding 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 ding, you know. And then he went to the hi hat. He only played about 4 bars, and he went to the hi hat. Like it seemed almost like he wanted to get out of there, you know. He kept that time. He kept the time up, and but he did not play bebop. He just played Sid Catlett, and it worked.
Yeah.
You know, but there was a lot of emptiness that you hear when Max is playing, you know, that fit these two guys better.
Yeah.
See?
Sure.
So, I mean, this is a fact. In other words, what they did is they chose a guy to, Max wasn't available, let's get somebody that can keep good time. That's all. And
Yeah.
it's not going to get in our way, and that's exactly what he did. He did not get in their way.
Yeah.
He played the open hi-hat like Max used to do, and still does, you know, which
Yeah.
is what fits with that style.
Yeah.
Shh, you know, that open hi-hat style kind
Yeah.
of thing. Got on, you know, and that's what he did. But he did not play bebop. That is not bebop drumming at all.
No.
No.
And we're going to get into bebop drumming really on the next show when we do Kenny Clark and Max Roach.
That's it.
Yeah.
But
In
I
addition
think,
to
but I
Shelley
think,
Mann
I
and
think
Buddy
Sid,
Rich.
but I think Sid used great taste in not doing something he couldn't do.
Wise move.
Exactly. He
Yeah.
didn't try to do so just because he was on a date with Charlie Parker and with Dizzy. He didn't try to do something that was not his thing.
You know, it's interesting in this time period, 45, 46, 47, there are actually many recordings of swing era drummers who were trying to play bebop. And
I know
wind
they
up
sounded
sounding
bad.
silly
Yeah, it was
'cause
awful. Sure,
they're trying to do so much
trying to do
stuff.
what they couldn't do.
Yeah,
That was what you call. That was much more tasteful.
yeah. It's 5 minutes before 8. We're talking with Mel Lewis. We're talking about Big Sid Catlett, and we just heard him with Charlie Parker and Dizzy Gillespie on Show Enough, and before that, the famous recording of Salt Peanuts with Al Haig and Curly Russell from early 1945. Right now, we're going to go to the quintessential Big Sid Catlett recording, in which we get to hear him really playing a lot of great stuff behind the solos, a lot of comping on the drums, and then an extended solo. This is Steak Face, which is what you can hear Louis Armstrong call Big Sid jokingly during the performance. Louis Armstrong and the All-Stars with Jack Teagarden and Barney Bigard, Dick Carey, Arvell Shaw, and Big Sid. You're listening to WKCR FM.
Well, now, that was, when you hear Big Sid with Louie, now that's first of all, that's his element. That's where he always played his very best. And now that solo was just so loaded with humor and fun and taste and music. It was just so musical, and you could see the people ate it up. He didn't need any fancy technique. He did some very difficult things in there.
Tell me about them.
Well, I can't really tell you. I mean, you could hear them. I can't tell you how he did them because, you don't know.
I mean, but what things?
Well, like he was playing his sticks on against, on a certain, right down by the edge of the drum, I know what he was doing, but I don't know how he did it. I've done these same kind of things my own way.
Sure.
And I know, I don't know how I do them either. You do them. There's sounds that just come to you. And you just fall into things,
I wasn't so much asking for an explanation of how he did it, but for us folks who aren't drummers, just to have an appreciation of some of the things he did.
Well, you heard some funny sounds that didn't sound like drums to you. And if you heard those sounds, those are the sounds I'm talking about. See, because regular drum sounds sound like regular drum sounds. He was making up sounds as he was going along. And he was creating sounds, which is what it's all about, making sounds. Ideas come to your head and you just do them. How you do them, who cares? You just do them. If the sound is strong enough in your head, you will do it.
That's the voice of Mel Lewis, and you're listening to Jazz Alternatives. The Wednesday evening edition is called The Musician Show, and again, Mel is here, part 3 of our history of jazz drums, and we're talking about the great drummer Big Sid Catlett, and that, of course, was his solo on Steakface, which comes from the album Satchmo at Symphony Hall, Louis Armstrong and the All-Stars on Decca Records. Now, how was it that someone like Sid could play with Louis Armstrong one minute, Dizzy and Bird the next moment, and get away with it?
Because he's a great drummer. That's all. I don't think there's a great drummer in the world who can't do that. I don't think it's that special to do. I think you just have to be a great drummer. You have to be an open-minded, musical, swinging drummer who likes all kinds of music. I think Sid Catlett and Dave Tuff and those guys actually could sit in with one of the symphony orchestras also, and even if they couldn't read the part, they could make something happen, even with a symphony. You fit in. I know they all played shows. I know they all worked in nightclubs and they played for acts.
Dancers.
Oh,
yeah.
I know they did that.
Yeah.
Not just dancers, comedians, but a lot of chorus lines, things like that, and comedians and singers, and some of the dumbest acts that ever existed, bird acts, dog acts. They had to do all those things.
Yeah.
You just do it, And it's because they didn't say no, and they also played weddings and bar mitzvahs, and they did that too. And don't think they didn't.
Amazing that both Big Sid and Davy Tuft hardly made 40 years old, and yet the tremendous...
Well, that's because they did other things they shouldn't have done. They also lived hard,
Yeah.
Nightclubs and drinking, and mostly drinking. The musicians in those days had a tendency to drink a little too much, for playing in the clubs, and no man knows his body usually until it's too late.
Yeah.
None of us think we're going to die at 40. Nobody does. You don't plan on it anyway.
Let's talk about bass drums for a minute, because that's an important part. We've talked a lot about cymbals. We just talk about relative size of bass drums, the bass drums that guys were playing back then, and what you remember of Dave and Big Sid's
well, all
bass
of them, they all played big bass drums. Dave Tuff was the first guy, really, to come on with a small bass drum. He was the initial, the first Gretsch little bass drum man.
I always thought he had a huge bass drum, I guess.
He did, but then Gretsch made him a small bass drum, and he was one of the first guys to use it. I remember the advertising. He was the first one that I think they laid one on, and he went out and started using it, and it sounded great. It suited him. Some people were afraid of him. I couldn't wait. I didn't know they were going to come out with small bass drums. My first bass drum was a 28 which is what everybody played. My second bass drum was a 26. Then I went to a 22. I never owned a 24. Never. I went to a 22. I played 22 through, through all the bands I was with, including Kenton. And when I left Kenton, I went to a 20, and I've never played anything bigger than a 20 ever since. Except now I play a 16-inch by 20, which Pearl made for me. It's a special drum. There are 16 by 20s made by some rock and roll companies for rock and roll.
Right.
But this drum was made for me special by Al Duffy at Pearl.
Mm-hmm.
Because he wanted me to try it. Actually, they don't. It's not in their catalog. They don't make a 16 by 20. But we were talking about the sound of a 22 and the sound of a 20, and he said, "Well, you get a great sound on a 20." I wonder what. I said, "Yeah, but I wonder what it'd be like a little deeper drum." And he made this for me, and we tried it, and boy, that's the one I use at the Vanguard, and that's fantastic bass drum. But actually, a 14 by 20 is absolutely suitable. I mean that. If you tune it properly, you don't need anything bigger than that. But that means you can't put anything inside it. You got to learn how to control it.
How about the Styx drummers played back in the 30s and 40s as compared to the way they are now? For drummers who would know what you're talking
Everybody
about.
used pretty normal sized sticks.
Did they have something on the tip, or were they just wood?
No, they were wood. Everything was wood. Everything was wood. All the heads were calf. Everything was very standard.
Yeah.
And most of them used a medium to light stick. Nobody used anything. Nobody used clubs, as they call them. And what rock and rollers do today is like ridiculous. They don't. That's not even. First of all, like you heard me say before, it's not drumming anyway. It's just noise.
Yeah.
And they use big clubs and they pound and they break everything and they make. It's just ridiculous. I mean, they're not drummers.
What about? I forgot what I was going to say. We're talking about the different kinds of sticks, and we talked about the bass drums. How about the grips? And again, for the drummers out there who would know what you're talking
Well,
about.
they use what they call traditional
How
grip.
did Davey and Big Sid hold the...
They held sticks the traditional way, like everybody else does, and like all great drummers today still do.
So there's pretty much one way to hold the
Yeah.
sticks.
In
Well-
fact, Dennis McCrell is one of the few guys I know coming up that really plays nice that uses a matched grip, and I don't know why he does. I really don't.
What's a matched grip?
Well, that's like holding them both with the same grip, like the right hand grip.
Mhm.
I don't agree with it, and I think he'd be smarter if he didn't, really. But he seems comfortable with it. So, but he's the only guy I've ever. Although Max Roach does it too now. He's been doing it for a few years.
Really?
Yeah, but I really disagree with it. But of course, they go back and forth.
Mhm.
I really think the traditional grip is the best grip. I think it's the loosest way to play.
Yeah. We're talking with Mel Lewis, and we're going through the history of jazz drums, and right now we're going to move from Big Sid Catlett to Shadow Wilson.
That sounds
And and we're going to kind of open up the gateway to the modern school of drumming. Next week we'll get to, if we have time, Kenny Clark, definitely, and Max Roach, Shelly Manne, and Buddy Rich. And then the show after that, we'll have to get to Art Blakey and a whole bunch of other great drummers. So why don't we run right into this? Before we hear Shadow's most famous solo, why don't we hear one that influenced a lot of people? This is Avenue C, Count Basie Band in 1944. And Shadow Wilson's on the drums. Everybody knows the All-American Rhythm Section sound with Joe Jones, and we dealt with that in some detail on our previous History of the Jazz Drum show. Now we're going to hear it with Shadow Wilson, Buck Clayton's Avenue C, and again, the focus is on Shadow.
Avenue C.
Yeah, that's the original '78 version, Avenue C, Shadow
Yep.
Wilson. So what are we getting into here that's different from what we heard?
Well, we're not getting into anything too different yet. It's still Shadow on that is more outspoken than Joe Jones, but he's Joe Jones. He's still within the realm of the All American Rhythm section, and his sound is a little different. He's looser. He's got a looser hi-hat feel than Joe had.
Yeah.
Of course, he was also younger, and there's also a little goofier, as in case people didn't know that. But he wasn't as reliable as Joe was, as personally. But as a player, he was moving into the modern. He was moving into the modern thing, which Joe was not. Joe never did. Into the modern mainstream of bebop, and Shadow was attempting that, and you can almost hear it, but he sounds like he's not quite. He's not ready to do it. And actually, Basie wanted that. Basie was looking for that. That's why I was asked to join the band in '48, and when I couldn't do it, and because of marvelous racism, which is the reason I didn't join the band. That's who they went back and got Shadow.
Went back and got Shadow
Yeah.
again. Yeah. Well, right now we have on the turntable the solo that really has Shadow Wilson's signature on it. It's a Jimmy Mundy original called Queer Street. And why don't we just go to it and hear it?
Yeah, then you'll hear something very special. Okay, now there you can hear a more modern style of drumming. Throughout, you could hear occasional off beats with the bass drum, little kick beats here and there. Also, he had that a very distinctive. He has a distinctive snare drum sound again. His drums sound different than Joe's, really.
Yeah.
And see now that everybody thinks that so-called 4-bar break. That's a 2-bar break. It's a double time break, and it's I think almost all drum. I think it's unanimous among most drummers. That's probably one of the greatest 2-bar breaks ever played on record, for several reasons. First of all, it's so imaginative, and who the heck would have thought of doing something like that in a recording studio? That's another thing. Boy, he took a chance.
Yeah.
You know. Of course, what we don't know is how many times he might have played that same break. We don't know. That might have been the only take. We weren't there. If he did it before, the band was ready for it because they sure came in okay. You know, it was perfect.
Yeah.
I mean, it was absolutely perfect. I never heard anything like that before. And that's see, this is the first recording I ever bought. This and Things to Come were my first 2 records that I ever bought. I didn't own a record player till I was 16 years old, and these are the 2 things I bought: Things to Come and Queer Street. So.
What was it at the beginning of the thing with the intro to the chart where he kind of played some stuff and you said like that's like Tiny like
well,
beginning.
I don't know if it's like Tiny.
No, I
Tiny
didn't.
probably came out of him.
Right, he did.
But you know,
But
that's real setups. Those
Right.
are real setups. That was the first time I really heard things like that coming on with that nice loose modern feel. You know.
Yeah.
The things that we do today, those things weren't done back in those days. You know, mostly it was just you caught with the band. You didn't actually set it up. That's
the crux of the issue right there.
That certain triplet way of doing it. See,
Mhm.
and it's not it's not dotted 8/6, it's bata. You know, you dig? It's real.
Quarter note triplets.
They're wide.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. Go ahead.
It's
Sorry.
modern. It's
Yeah.
just modern drumming. It's.
Well, we're going to find out right now what Shadow did a couple of minutes before that take, because we do have a rare unissued version of Queer Street that was done as a rehearsal to that.
Oh, good.
So why don't we hear another one and see if he's doing the same thing or whether.
Yeah, because I never heard
Yeah.
of that.
Okay. Here's an alternate take of Queer Street. Same day, same studio, just a few minutes before the famous '78 version we just heard. Again, Shadow Wilson on the drums with Count Basie's band.